War has many ghosts. Some were the faces of the people you've lost. Others hide in static, whispering through radios long after the voices behind them are gone. It started with a transmission faint, broken and impossible to trace. 5, 8, 2, 4, 7, then silence, then the same numbers again. The signal came from a remote jungle base where Bravo unit had been stationed. 12 soldiers vanished without a trace 3 weeks earlier. Command assumed the worst. An ambush, a landslide, maybe a retreat gone wrong. But when that signal appeared, they decided to send in a retrieval team. That team was us. We left before dawn. The fog was already thick, the kind that clings to your uniform and makes the world feel smaller, claustrophobic. The ride was silent except for the rumble of the armored vehicle and the constant hiss of static on the radio.
Ow.
Our leader, Sergeant Davis, broke the silence. "Still coming through?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I tapped the receiver. No variation. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the gray wall of fog ahead. Then that means someone or something is still broadcasting. We arrived at Bravo's base by mid-morning. The fog was so dense we could barely see 10 feet ahead. The gate hung open, its chain cut clean through. Beyond it, the compound looked like a ghost town. Half-collapsed buildings, scattered equipment, a few vehicles rusting in the mud. The place felt wrong. Not destroyed, but abandoned. Like everyone just stopped existing in the middle of whatever they were doing. We disembarked. The smell hit us first. Rot, gun oil, and something metallic like old blood. I could hear my own breathing loud and ragged inside my mask. Davis motioned for us to fan out, weapons ready. Inside the barracks, we found the first signs of panic. Tables were overturned, supplies scattered across the floor. There were bullet holes in the walls, but strangely, no shell casings. And then the blood-thin streaks leading from the hallway toward the command center. The radio inside was still alive, its green light blinking in the gloom. 5, 8, 2, 4, 7. The numbers droned on. "Still on a loop," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Like it's automated." Davis shook his head, a grim look on his face. Or someone said it that way before, whatever happened. Private Lee, the youngest in our group, was staring at the message board. Pinned there was a torn page from a notepad. The same numbers, 5, 8, 2, 4, 7. Scrawled over and over in a trembling hand. At the bottom, a single, desperate line. "They're coming for us." Lee's voice cracked as he whispered. "Who's coming?" No one answered. The silence felt heavier than any sound. We continued searching room by room. Every space was the same chaos, frozen mid-motion. Coffee cups still warm to the touch. A deck of cards scattered across a table as if a game was interrupted mid-play. But in the lab area, everything changed. The door was splintered inward, hanging off its hinges. Inside were rows of overturned desks and shattered equipment. The air was thick with the smell of ammonia and decay. And then I saw the bodies. At least 6 of them. What was left of Bravo unit. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide open, mouths twisted in silent screams that would never be heard. There were no gunshots, no wounds. Looked like they'd all suffocated, but without a single mark on their throats, the gagged turning away. One of the other soldiers whispered a prayer under his breath. I approached the far side of the lab where a single body sat slumped against the wall. The captain's insignia glinted faintly on his sleeve. Davis recognized him immediately. "Commander Haskins," he said quietly, his voice full of a sorrow I couldn't comprehend. Haskins's hand was clenched around a notebook. On the open page were the same numbers, 58247, written one last time, followed by something new, a chilling warning. "Don't let them speak. Don't let them in." Before I could ask what that meant, the lights flickered and died. The generator outside sputtered and went silent. Then through the thick static of the radio, we heard it. A voice, faint, raspy, repeating the numbers, but now slower. 5, 8, 2. In between each number, a whisper. Something human, something alive. Davis didn't hesitate. "Move out now," he yelled. We ran for the exit, but the fog outside had thickened, transformed. It rolled like smoke, swallowing the buildings one by one. I couldn't even see our vehicle anymore. Then Lee screamed. Something was moving inside the Mista shadow, tall and heavy, its outline bending unnaturally with each step. The fog parted around it like it was alive, wrapping and folding over itself in ways that defied physics. "Eyes on," Davis shouted, raising his rifle. But there was nothing to shoot at, only the fog shifting in patterns that shouldn't exist. The numbers came again, this time echoing through the fog itself, not from the radio, not from us, but from somewhere all around us. 5, 8, 2, 4. My headset crackled to life. A voice came through, low and distorted, speaking directly to me. "You shouldn't have come." That's when we ran. We didn't look back, not until we were halfway down the jungle trail, stumbling through the mud and roots. The fog seemed to chase us, flowing between the trees like a liquid shadow. By the time we reached the main road, the signal had stopped completely. Silence. When we finally made it back to command, they didn't believe us. The official report said Bravo unit was lost to chemical exposure. We were debriefed, sworn to secrecy, and told not to speak about what we'd found or what we heard. They buried the truth under a mountain of paperwork. That night, back in the barracks, while cleaning my radio gear, I picked up a faint pulse again. Same frequency, same pattern. But this time, when the numbers ended, another voice followed, broken, distant, and utterly terrified. They found us. I smashed the receiver against the wall and never turned it back on. Sometimes, late at night, when the fog creeps low over the fields and the wind dies down to a whisper, I swear I can still hear them. The numbers, counting, waiting like it's just a matter of time before they reach me too. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. War changes a person, twists the mind long before it ever breaks the body. But nothing, not the constant gunfire, not the screaming, not the endless sweat-soaked nights, nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed deep in that jungle. I was drafted straight into the Army during the Vietnam War. I was just 19, fresh out of high school, and honestly, I was more afraid of getting yelled at by the sergeants than I was of being shot at by the enemy. They trained me to be a radio operator, one of those poor souls lugging around a communications pack the size of a small coffin. My unit had just lost its previous operator to a landmine. I still remember standing there, looking at the spot where he died, just a blackened patch of scorched earth and a helmet half buried in the thick red mud. That was my welcome party to Vietnam. Weeks turned into a blur of firefights and long bloody marches through the suffocating jungle. Then one day my commanding officer pulled me aside. "You're being reassigned," he said, his voice flat. "Intelligence wants you." I thought it was some kind of promotion, a way out of the mud. I was wrong. A man arrived the next morning by helicopter. He was older, well-dressed, and didn't look like any soldier I had ever seen. He introduced himself as Officer Richard C. Douglas, though he barely spoke to anyone else. His uniform was spotless, completely untouched by the grime and humidity of the jungle that clung to the rest of us. He looked at me with cold, assessing eyes. "Pack your gear," he told me. "You're with me now." We flew for what felt like an hour, the jungle canopy a green, endless sea below us. Finally, we landed in a small, heavily wooded clearing. This place wasn't on any map I'd ever seen. The landing zone was crudely fenced off with barbed wire, and men moved like shadows between the tents and makeshift wooden huts. There was no chatter, no laughter, none of the usual dark humor soldiers used to cope. Just a quiet, unnerving hum of machinery and the constant buzz of insects. Something about the air itself felt wrong. It was thick, heavy with a chemical scent. Even the birds seemed to avoid this part of the jungle. As soon as our boots hit the ground, Douglas barked a few orders at two other men and walked off. He pointed to a small, isolated hut and told me to stay inside until someone came for me. But my curiosity and maybe my stupidity got the better of me. After half an hour of stewing in that hot, silent little box, I stepped outside. The camp was eerily still. The soldiers I saw, they didn't look right. Their faces were blank, pale as if they hadn't slept in weeks. Their eyes were distant, focused on something I couldn't see. It was like they were sleepwalking. I approached one guy, just a kid really, and asked him where the officer had gone. He just stared at me, completely silent, his eyes vacant, until I felt a chill run down my spine and backed away. That's when I heard it. A low, persistent hum, like an electrical current, coming from a large tent in the center of the camp. I knew I shouldn't go in there. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn around and run, but I didn't listen. The tent flap was half open. Smell hit me first. A vile mix of metal, rot, and something sharp and acidic that burned my nostrils. I pushed the flap aside and stepped in. My blood ran cold. Inside were glass tanks, lined up against the canvas walls. They were filled with a murky green fluid. Wires and tubes snaked out from the tops of these tanks. It's all connecting to a generator that buzzed faintly in the corner, providing that low hum I'd heard. And inside those tanks, were heads. 6 of them, human heads, just floating there. Their eyes were wide open, their faces twisted into silent screams, as if they were frozen in their final moment of terror. But they weren't still. Their mouths twitched. Their eyelids fluttered rhythmically. Tiny bubbles leaked from their nostrils as if they were still trying desperately to breathe. I stumbled backward, my legs giving out, and nearly tripped over a crate filled with syringes. On a nearby table, I saw a scattered collection of photographs. Some were enemy soldiers, some were American. Next to them were diagrams of the human brain, with notes scribbled in angry red ink. One phrase was circled, "Neural activity sustained test incomplete." Then I heard footsteps right behind me. It was Douglas. His face, usually so calm and composed, was now twisted with an absolute terrifying fury. "You shouldn't have seen this," he hissed, his voice dangerously low. "Get back to your hut, now." He grabbed my shoulder, his grip so tight I thought the bone would snap. I tried to speak, to ask what this was, but before I could get a single word out, a sharp, blinding pain tore through my skull and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a field hospital miles away, surrounded by strangers in clean white uniforms. My ribs were broken, and my collarbone was cracked. K-Medic told me they'd found me unconscious near the smoldering wreckage of a destroyed encampment. No survivors. I tried to explain. I told them about Douglas, about the tent, about the heads in the tanks. But the doctors just exchanged worried looks. They told me there was no record of any Officer Douglas ever being assigned to this sector. No classified operations nearby, no experimental station. They said I must have suffered severe head trauma, that the things I saw were just hallucinations. Nightmares brought on by a blast concussion. They put it all down to the madness of war. But I know what I saw. I know it was real. Years passed. The war ended. I came home, but a part of me never left that jungle. I spent years trying to find him, to find some proof. I searched through military archives, old unit rosters, newly declassified records. Nothing. It was like Richard C. Douglas never existed. But here's the thing that haunts me. The photographs I saw on that table in the tent. Their faces are burned into my memory. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm in my workshop, tinkering with my old ham radio, the static will shift. Just for a second, white noise will part, and I can hear faint, garbled whispers. Dozens of them. They sound low, wet, begging, "Help us." And somewhere beneath that chorus of lost voices, a sound I can never ever unhear is the faint, rhythmic bubbling of water. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps, and I'll see you in the next one. When you serve long enough on any Air Force base, you start hearing stories, old ghost tales, passed from shift to shift. Most are just harmless jokes, meant to spook the new recruits. But the story about the girl on Echo Road wasn't one of those. It was the kind people only talked about after dark, and never with a smile. I was stationed in Louisiana back in 2006. Think hot, sticky nights, mosquitoes the size of bullets, and long, lonely patrols through the back roads that cut behind the base's storage facility. On just my second night, my post partner, a senior airman named Collins, started in on the legend. He told me a worker's daughter had died out there, way back when the storage yard was first being built. She'd been playing near one of the unfinished concrete towers, fell from the scaffolding, and snapped her neck. The story goes she still wanders that road at night, moaning for her father. Of course, I laughed it off. We all did. But Collins didn't laugh. He just stared straight ahead into the darkness and said, "You'll understand when you hear her." Fast forward 3 years. By then, I'd been posted there long enough to know every inch of that base. The horror stories had faded into background noise, just part of the local color. But one night, I drew Echo Road again, the one place I swore I'd never think twice about. To make things worse, Our normal Humvee was in maintenance. So they gave us a cattle truck, this rattling, diesel-fumed monster that made every patrol feel twice as long and 1,000 times louder. My partner that night was Sergeant Miller, a quiet, solid guy, the kind you want with you when things get weird. The shift dragged on. It was around 4 a.m. We were both tired, just ready to finish our last sweep and call it a night. The base was silent, that deep, empty kind of silence where even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. As we rolled down Echo Road, our headlights sliced through this thick fog that had crept in from the woods. Halfway down, I felt at first that crawling unease, like the air itself had turned thick and heavy. Even the truck's constant rumble began to fade, as though the sound were being swallowed by the fog. I turned off the radio, thinking it was just interference. And then, in that moment of total dead quiet, I heard it. A moan. It was soft at first, a long, low sound human, but not quite right. It seemed to come from behind us. Maybe it was outside, maybe it wasn't. My first thought was that Miller was messing with me, but when I glanced over, his hands were white on the steering wheel. "Did you?" I started. "Yeah," he whispered, his voice tight. I heard it. He slowed the truck down, almost to a crawl. The sound came again, longer this time, like someone trying to drag a breath through water. It echoed through the cab, a chilling vibration I felt deep in my bones. Miller killed the engine. Silence. Complete and utter silence. Then the moan again, but closer now. It was impossible to pinpoint where it was coming from. The air in the truck felt charged, static, and the hair on my arms was standing straight up. A faint, sharp smell of iron, like old blood, filled the cab. I whispered, "Dive." Miller didn't move. He was frozen. The moan twisted into a gurgle, the sickening sound of a throat full of liquid. Then we heard a scrape, a long, drawn-out sound along the outside of the truck bed, and then 3 knocks. Slow, heavy, deliberate knocks against the metal panel right behind our heads. That's what broke him. Miller slammed the truck into gear. We tore down Echo Road so fast I nearly lost my flashlight out the window. The groaning followed us, faint but constant, until the exact moment we burst through the gate back to the main base. We parked right in front of the security office, hearts pounding in our chests. Neither of us spoke for what felt like an eternity. When we finally got out and told our flight chief what happened, we expected him to laugh at us, to tell us we were just tired. Instead, he let out a long sigh, looked at us with weary eyes, and said quietly, "You're not the first to hear her. Just be glad you didn't stop the truck." He refused to explain what he meant by that. For months after that night, I refused any patrol that took me anywhere near that storage yard. But sometimes, even now, when the wind blows just right from that direction, I swear I can still hear a faint moaning on the air, the same broken sound of someone who never stopped falling. What do you think? Have you ever heard a story that turned out to be more real than you ever imagined? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.